joining us in D.C., Marjorie Clifton, National Independent Editor of GoVote.com.
Yeah.
Marjorie, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to see you. And also Flip Padeau is here, a strategist and the president of the American Civics Exchange.
Morning.
Flip, thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, it's a delight.
Appreciate it. It's such a busy time, and the question is, this really could go any way in terms of who the GOP candidate is. I'll start with what we posed to those who are watching, Marjorie, and ask you about the line of the $10,000 bet. Are we making more of it than we should? Even if he had bet $10, what would be the difference?
No, I think it is about the dollar amount here. I mean, I personally do not like to make bets because at the end of the bet, I want my money back regardless of what happens. And I don't have $10,000 that I would just, throw on the table like it's pocket change. And I think that's how he came off. And right now, Mitt Romney is under a lot of scrutiny, and frankly, he's not dealing very well with the pressure. And it's this likability thing that is a real issue for him in his election at this juncture. And what the bet made him look like was, up $10,000, it's nothing to me. And when $10,000 to the average middle-class American is 2 months' salary, that's a big deal. And I mean, no one on that GOP stage is frankly hurting for cash. I mean, it's a pretty wealthy crowd up there. So I think the relatability issue is one of awareness and knowing who you're talking to. And I mean, to Mitt's credit, he would have won the bet. But at the same time, I mean, he was right. And that's probably why Perry chose not to take him up on it. But again, Romney, I mean, one of his biggest battles is seeming approachable, seeming relatable, and not coming off as this, wealthy, out-of-touch person. And so, I mean, I think that's what hurt him. Now, Gingrich, by the way, made the same mistake as well in South Carolina. He was speaking to a group in South Carolina where the average median income is about $42,000 a year. And he was making a comment about, well, why would I lobby? I make $60,000 every time I give a speech. So I think it's more about who was the messenger at this point, and it was not a good thing for Romney.
No, that came up, actually, the comparison to the Newt Gingrich comments, so I'm really glad that you mentioned it. Flip, do you agree? Because it seems to me what is surprising is that when you walk into a debate, particularly where we've had so many of them, pretty much you know what the questions will be.
Right.
And pretty much your staff has prepped you on the answers. And if someone had not told Mitt Romney to come up with this comment, then it was off the cuff, it was human.
Right. I think that's probably right. It did come across as spontaneous. I think the blowback is a little bit out of sync, I think, with the damage that it might do to him, however fleeting it might be. To me, it was not a great line, I think, just because it seemed kind of juvenile, like a playground taunt. When you're certain of something and you think the other person isn't, you say, "I'll bet you $1 million," whatever. Well, I think so. The fact checking would have come out and would have borne out Romney's position. To sort of put Perry on the spot and say, "Are you willing to stake $10,000 of it on it?" He could have simply said, to the charity of the winner's choosing. It would have been a more endearing and less sort of throwing money around comment. But the point was basically his saying,
because that is a good idea.
But Romney's basically saying, "I know I'm right. Are you willing to say you're as confident in knowing that I'm right?" But I think the reason that we're seeing the media accounts declare this as exposing Romney being out of touch is that Obama and his media allies have a great interest in that becoming the narrative about Romney should he be the nominee, that he's out of touch because it's one that's being
right.
60 Minutes is
that the out of touch part.
So that's the media and Obama. That is definitely the narrative that they want to push. I think for two reasons. One, it seeks to defang what is really Romney's greatest strength to counter Obama, which is that Romney understands how the economy works. He's been very successful in the private sector. I wouldn't hold that against him. It shows that he knows what he's doing. His leadership is sound, and he's made good decisions, and he's been a successful leader in the private and public sector. So it declaws that. At the same time, it very much is in sync with Obama's newest of this line of a succession of several campaign themes, which is now he really seems to be gelling on it's strictly class warfare. It's not about winning the future. It's not about hope and change. It's not about Obama being the adult in the room. Now it's simply 99 versus 1%. It's rich versus everyone else. Mitt Romney is wealthy. and therefore he's out of touch. So if they can seize on a message like this that bolsters that theme and that can sort of neutralize Romney's, again, I think, greatest strength versus someone who's never had a real private sector job, who's never shown any leadership or genuine accomplishment, that's sort of a double-barreled way for them to try to attack what still is, I think, the presumptive nominee.
And actually, Marjorie, that's what Mitt Romney, if I could just throw this in before you comment, brought up this morning on Fox and Friends. He was with Brian Kilmeade getting an important endorsement in Manchester and said, I've had 25 years experience in the private sector and President Obama has had none. He also said, my wife told me after the debate it was a good debate, but betting is not really his expertise.
Right.
Is it over, or are we going to continue to talk about it, you think?
I mean, I think it's more, again, about the larger issue of Romney's been cruising along for a period of time, and he's now, over the past couple of weeks, been under a lot more scrutiny and, frankly, has been sort of buckling under pressure. And it's this likability thing. And, I mean, to the point on, the class warfare and Romney coming under scrutiny by the Democrats, absolutely it's a talking point to say, look, Romney's out of touch. He doesn't understand the people. But, I mean, the reality is he's getting that from his other Republican primary opponents as well. I mean, that's sort of the play everyone's making is who's the most relatable, which is why they tell these stories of working in their father's workshops and how their father struggled through and didn't have any money. And, I mean, Romney's used that as well when he was a Mormon missionary, talked about living on $400. But, again, that's politics. It plays like that on both sides of the aisle. I don't think that's anything new. But, so I think, I don't think that it's this one instance that's going to be the deal breaker for Romney. I think it's that he's done a series of interviews where he comes off as a little bit cold, a little bit prickly, and instead of, Gingrich has done beautifully is handle his opponents who've brought a lot to him with humor, and he's sort of managed to laugh about things. He's managed to not let it ruffle him, and Romney very visibly gets ruffled, and that's what this was seen as, not so much even a schoolboyish thing to do, but it was, or a very rich schoolboyish thing to do, but it came off as somewhat aggressive and not as playful maybe as it was intended.
For anyone that missed it, can I ask our control room to play the sound from the debate? Do we have it, Hope?
We could reenact it if you want.
Okay, here you go, guys. Take a look.
Okay, let's start with the last one. Let's be candid. The only reason you didn't become a career politician is you lost to Teddy Kennedy in 1994.
Well, now wait a second. Now wait a second. Now wait a second.
No, and I'm just saying, I looked at it, I thought, I'm a citizen. I've served the country in many ways. You're a citizen. You served the country in many ways. But it's a bit much. You'd have been a 17-year career politician by now if you'd won. That's all I'm saying on that one.
All right, we're going to play the other one now. Romney took a beating in that one, though, from Newt Gingrich.
This was an outrageous number to answer an outrageous charge from him, and it's been proven wrong time and time again. He keeps raising it, and I said, okay, let's put something outrageous out there. It's like saying, hey, I'll bet you $1 million X, Y, or Z. And so, let me tell you, afterwards, my wife came up and she said, Mitt, it was a great debate. You're great at a lot of things, just not betting.
Right.
So.
Well, that actually was from Brian's interview. That was a treat. I didn't think we were going to be able to replay that. So essentially everyone gets the message about what that was. Let me ask you about the other candidates, though, Marjorie. At this point, where do they stand? Jon Huntsman, not part of that debate, spending a lot of time. He sat here, right here with me last week. We had a chance to speak with him. He certainly has credentials, and he's focused on New Hampshire, heavy. But the endorsement, at least in Manchester, went to Mitt Romney. What's the future of him, of Michelle Bachmann, of Ron Paul, Rick Santorum? Where do you see these candidates after Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's come down to a Gingrich-Romney standoff. I mean, I think that Ron Paul's a little bit the sleeper and has actually had a very strong following, but there are certain positions that he holds that are so against conservative beliefs such as legalization of marijuana and some of these extreme positions he takes that I don't think will allow him to eventually become the nominee. But it really has come down to all eyes on Gingrich and Romney. And, with Gingrich, it's for everyone. I think it's been a question of when's he going to step in it. I mean, I've been calling him sort of the nutty professor, and that he's got a lot of ideas, some of which are brilliant and others which are just a little bit crazy. And he's been handling himself very, very well, as he did over the weekend in the debate. And I think it's just a question of, can he maintain that momentum that he's built? And with Romney, he's been very steady throughout the entire the entire primary season. He's done a tremendous job at fundraising, but it's just, again, a question of, will he come across and overcome some of those things that are challenges for him, such as this likability factor, such as his past positions and flip-flopping, and unfortunately as well, his being a Mormon and how that will play with evangelical Christians. So there's a few factors with him that I think are a big question mark. But again, I think those are sort of the two candidates that it's going to come down to.
What do you think, Flip? What are they thinking right now? It's in Iowa, in order to succeed. Tell me if I'm wrong with the caucuses. You need operations. You need folks on the ground.
You do, and this is why the Gingrich lead at this point is a little bit quizzical, because he continues to be way behind both infrastructure, staff, and money.
That's amazing that you could be a front runner and people can still say you don't have the infrastructure.
To really solidified a lead, a double-digit lead in some polls that none of the other non-Romney, boomlets produced. That'll now presumably change. He'll presumably ramp up the pace, but enough so in the next few weeks before Iowa, it's hard to tell. And so, more so than in a primary state, as you suggested, in a caucus, you need to get people to go to any of these caucus locations and wait sometimes for hours on end to make their voices heard. So if he's really stirred up an impassioned base of support, particularly with Tea Party Republicans, with the sort of primary base voters, maybe they are the type that'll be less fickle in terms of turning out in a snowstorm or sticking it out on his behalf. But I think it'll be an interesting test bed to see just how much that infrastructure does come into play. If you enter a contest with a significant lead, but don't have that infrastructure to back it up, how much does that erode that lead? As for the other candidates, the other non-Romney Gingrich candidates, I wouldn't expect you to see any of the other, say, four that are really in it to at least registering in the polls to drop out by Iowa. I think in part because we've seen, and they've seen so much rapid and drastic shift in the polling numbers to date that no one wants to take themselves out of it and to have sort of a Pawlenty regrettable moment, think, well, what if I would have been the next one to benefit? So Ron Paul always has an army of very fervent followers.
He does.
He may do very well. Bachmann, having won the straw poll there, I think is optimistic that she can
Hometown girl.
that she can resurge a bit. But ultimately, I think it is day by day becoming more and more so a two-man race.
Interesting. Let me just move on to the interview that the president did, Marjorie, with 60 Minutes. We're going to talk about this in our bias bash with Cal Thomas, but I got to say, I watched that interview and I thought to myself, Steve Kroft jumped in when he could, or when he decided to, but not a lot of challenges to the president. Did it feel to you, in all fairness, fair and balanced, like a bit of a open forum for the president?
Well, I mean, the president's been under a lot of fire for a very long time. So, I mean, I don't know. I felt like it was a conversation. I felt like it was interesting because we haven't had a lot of time to hear Obama sort of talk openly about what's been happening in the country and the economy with the upcoming primary. And so I thought in that way it was actually nice to have that opportunity to hear from him. But, the opportunity is always there for reporters if they want to ask hard questions. So I think that it was good to get sort of a State of the Union off timing right now. So I thought it was good.
But was it appropriate, Flip, for the president to use that opportunity when the American people have so many questions about their future, to use that opportunity to attack the GOP candidates?
It's election season.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just say that it's the same thing Republicans do. It's the same thing Democrats do. It is no different by party. And I mean, if you look at the primary candidates right now, they're going after the president, and it's his position to defend himself. So I mean, it's
right, but they have to. because they want to differentiate their position.
Well,
But
so
the
does he, because
well,
he's got
no,
a,
the president actually has a job to do. He's got the job.
Well, right. He was in this interview in the capacity of president of the